In the hush before the midnight hour, the air settles around the bed like an old quilt, stitched from centuries of forgotten sighs and unfinished prayers. This room, this place of breath and slumber, has always known how to keep a secret. Tonight it holds one more. Tonight the walls remember the worst fathers that ever walked these stone corridors and torchlit halls. Their footsteps echo still, drifting down spiral staircases, across cold monastery courtyards, through the damp chambers of plague hospitals and drafty keeps. Each story a whisper, each whisper a cradle for the restless mind that longs for sleep. Beyond the window, a lantern swings, its flame caught by the wind. Somewhere far below, a fox pads across the frost. A shutter creaks like a memory that cannot quite close. Somewhere inside, a voice waits to be heard again. Not to condemn, but to be known, and then forgotten in the soft blanket of night. Where are they watching from now, these broken fathers? Perhaps from the falconer's roost, where feathers drift through a courtyard at dawn. Or the cellar, where barrels of ale hide the scent of betrayal. Or the orchard well, where secrets sink into muddy water beneath fallen apples. Where is the listener resting now? What time is it there? The corner a candle weeps down its wick, a tiny pool of light breathing warmth into stone. The bed sags just so beneath the weight of dreams yet to come. The floor remembers every footfall, every slammed door, every hush of a child pressing ear to floorboards, wondering what words the shadows spoke. Let the world slow its turning. Let the hearth's last ember glow like an old coin at the bottom of a beggar's cup. Let the plague hospital's halls stand empty tonight, no more footsteps echoing except in memory. Let the monastery's bells ring only in sleep. Dim the lights, if they're not dim already. Let the blankets gather around shoulders like a cloak of moonlight. Listen to the breath settle, the mind loosen, the heartbeat echo softly. Far from the worst fathers who ever were. This is only a memory, an echo, a hush before sleep. The kings and bakers, the tithing men and stewards, the surgeons and guards, they have all passed through these pages. Tonight they return, not to wake the dead, but to soothe the living into sleep. Close the shutters of the mind. Let the latch fall silent. The world will fade soon enough. There is no blame left here, only drifting stories and a warm bed. The night is wide, and the dreams are waiting. When ready, drift onward into the first chamber, where the worst father ever crowned once sat silent on a crumbling throne. In the deepest corner of the castle, behind a door that never closed quite right, the throne room held its breath beneath the weight of stone. It had been built to awe, but now the tapestries hung limp, their threads frayed where rats had made their nests. Cold seeped through the flagstones and settled into the bones of any who lingered too long. He sat there, the king who wore a crown that never truly fit. His hands rested heavy on the carved arms of the throne, fingers drumming like distant thunder on oak. They said he was a father to a realm, but the realm knew better. Fathers protect, fathers forgive. This one only watched, eyes clouded like the sky before a storm. His son stood at the edge of the dais, where the rushes lay stale and scattered. Small feet made no sound on the stone, but the boy's breathing filled the hall, soft and uneven like a bird caught behind shutters. His hair fell across his eyes. He dared not look up. For what child wants to see what lives in the hollows of a cruel father's gaze? The courtiers had long fled to their chambers, their whispers tucked behind thick doors. Only the torch flames knew what words were spoken here, what promises broken, what lines drawn in dust. At the king's feet lay a letter, torn in half, where an apology might have been read. Beyond the narrow windows, a storm gathered its courage. Thunder rolled low, pressing its back against the hills. In the courtyard below, the stone gargoyles seemed to grin wider, teeth slick with rain. A lone falcon shifted on its perch, feathers ruffled by wind that carried the scent of cold iron and wilted flowers from the graveyard beyond the walls. The boy's breath trembled as he thought of his mother, buried beneath a slab of slate, her name worn smooth by seasons. She had tried once to shield him, but shadows slipped through the tiniest cracks. His father's voice was softer now, each word drawn out like a blade from its sheath. There was no shouting, no rage, only disappointment, dripping like water through a leak in the roof. In this place, no one spoke of kindness. No one spoke of the day when the throne would pass to the boy with the hollow eyes. For now, he was a ghost in his own story, drifting through corridors where guards lowered their gaze and servants vanished into cupboards until his footsteps faded. He wondered if the crown would feel as heavy on his brow as it looked on his father's. He wondered if his own son, should he ever have one, would stand where he stood now, breath caught in his throat, waiting for the throne's judgment. The thunder came closer, tapping at the glass like an impatient guest. Candles shivered on the sconces. The king's fingers drummed again, then fell still. Somewhere down the hall, a door creaked on its hinges, a sound too small to change the world. But the boy flinched anyway, hope beating in his chest like a moth trapped in a jar. A gust of wind found its way inside, flickering the flames, carrying the scent of wet earth and something sweeter. Apples from the orchard, perhaps, or the ghost of springtime long gone. The boy's eyes lifted at last, searching for some scrap of warmth. But the king's gaze was fixed on the broken letter, seeing not his son, but the echo of a disappointment that had been planted long before the boy's first cry. The night stretched on, the shadows thickening in the corners. The falcon on its perch settled its wings, watching from the window ledge like an omen too tired to fly. In the end, no harsh words needed to be spoken. The throne did the speaking. The walls did the remembering. The boy's footsteps did the leaving. When the storm broke, rain drummed on the stone like a lullaby for the broken crown. Somewhere in a distant chamber, a boy curled up on rushes, sleep tugging him under where no throne could follow. The worst fathers do not always roar. Sometimes they whisper, and that is enough to haunt a castle for centuries. Sleep now where the echoes cannot reach. Drift onward to where the cellar door creaks on its hinges and secrets settle into the damp. Beneath the main hall, where the hearth's warmth could never reach, the cellar door breathed in the dark. Its iron hinges remembered every hand that had forced it open, every father who had come here, with secrets pressed between his ribs like smuggled coins. The air smelled of damp stone and spoiled barley, a place where barrels sweated and rats traced their silent maps along the walls. In one corner, a baker once kept his flour sacks stacked so high they brushed the beams. By day, he wore a smile wide as his bread loaves, his laughter rolling through the village square like sweet smoke. By night, his feet found this stair, each step creaking under the burden he carried. His children slept above, cheeks flushed from firelight, never knowing what bargains their father struck in the hush below. The cellar walls were lined with shelves of salted meats and cloudy jars, but at the back, behind the cider casks, the true heart of this place waited. A trapdoor sunk low into the earth, its edges blackened with old stains. The lock was simple, a single bolt that knew too much. When it clicked open, the cellar seemed to hold its breath. They said he traded more than flour for coin. They said he sold names to passing men cloaked in winter furs, men who smelled of sweat and far-off battles. The baker's tongue, honeyed in daylight, turned sharp and bitter down here. Every secret was measured on his scales. Every betrayal wrapped in rough cloth and buried beneath barrels until the right price found it. One winter, when the river froze so thick no boat could break it, the baker's eldest crept to the stairwell. He had heard the voices, muffled, cruel, like wolves feasting on a lamb they never meant to kill quickly. The boy's feet were bare on the stone, breath blooming white in the candlelit gloom. He pressed his ear to the trapdoor, palms trembling as the wind rattled the shutter overhead. Below, his father's words fell like stale crumbs, promises traded for gold. Neighbors' names slipped through cracked lips, a debt paid with another man's shame. The boy saw it then. The bread on their table, warm and soft, rose from flour mixed with betrayal. When the baker climbed the stairs at dawn, snow clinging to his boots, he found his son, waiting by the dying hearth. Their eyes met, one hollow with secrets, the other hollow with knowing. No word passed between them. The boy turned back to the embers, letting the heat sting his palms, and the father slipped his hands into his pockets where silver coins burned cold against his skin. In the village, they spoke kindly of the baker's crusty loaves, the way his pies sweetened any feast. They never wondered what hid beneath the cellar door. They never knew how a father's bargain could sour a son's sleep for the rest of his days. In the years that followed, the boy grew quiet, his back bent from lifting sacks that weighed more than truth. He avoided the cellar, left the trapdoor locked, and the secrets to rot in the dirt. But some nights, when the wind rattled the shutters just so, he would wake with the taste of cold coins on his tongue, certain he could hear the lock click open again, slow as a heartbeat. Now the cellar door stays shut, but the stones remember every whisper. Barrels swell with moisture, the shelves sag with dust, and the air curls around old promises that will never rise like bread. Father's bargain made in darkness always leaves hunger behind. Upstairs, the hearth crackles in another house, another century. A candle flickers near a child's bed. Sleep drifts in like flour on a baker's sleeve. Soft, inevitable, sweet. Let the cellar door stay closed tonight. Slip further down the hall, where feathers drift and talons clutch at blame in a courtyard washed pale by dawn. In the pale hush before sunrise, the courtyard lay soaked in dew, its flagstones slick where moss crept up from the edges. A falconer's tower rose at the corner, its wooden beams bleached gray by storms and seasons that had no care for fathers or sons. High above, the mews echoed with the restless rustle of feathers, wings shifting against iron bars, claws scraping at worn perches, hungry eyes glinting in the half-dark. He was the falconer of this keep, a father not by choice but by blood, a man who trusted a bird's loyalty more than the warmth of any child's hand. His fingers were calloused from tying jesses and snapping necks of rabbits brought in from the field. The birds obeyed his voice, his whistle, the leather glove darkened by their talons. But his boy, the slight shape who watched him from the edge of the courtyard, remained as untamable as any hawk loosed before its time. At first, the boy followed him everywhere, eager to hold a lure, to gather fallen feathers into a bundle he'd tie with scraps of ribbon. He waited at the base of the tower, breath fogging in the dawn air, eyes wide for a sign of praise that never came. The father's gaze, when it drifted to the boy at all, was the same look he gave a falcon that flew too high and never returned. Weary, suspicious, resigned to loss before loss arrived. One winter, a white gerfalcon was gifted to the lord of the keep, a prize so rare its feathers seemed spun from snow and moonlight. The falconer kept it chained beside his bed, waking at every flutter. He cared for the bird like a jewel, more precious than any vow spoken under a chapel's eaves. The boy, drawn to its pale wings, crept close when his father turned away, offering scraps of meat, quiet coos, the soft promise of trust. But trust is a fragile thing. One dawn, the tower door was left ajar, the latch undone by small hands that wanted only to feel the wind lift a friend into the sky. The bird was gone before the sun cleared the treetops, a pale shadow wheeling higher and higher until it vanished in the hush. Above the forest canopy, when the falconer woke to the empty perch, the tower seemed smaller, the air close and sour. I found his son crouched near the base of the tower, eyes fixed on the horizon where a single white feather drifted down like winter's first snow. The father said nothing. He only raised his gloved hand and struck the boy across the cheek, once, sharp as a talon's slash. No words of fury, no curses, only that single blow, a lesson that echoed louder than any shout. The boy did not cry, simply pressed his palm to the bruise blooming beneath his eye, feeling its warmth, its truth. In that moment, the bond between them cracked like a snapped jess rope. The falconer turned away, climbing the tower's spiral once more. It's already searching the sky for a speck of white that would never return. Years later, when the boy had grown into a man with a limp in his step and a hollow place in his chest where forgiveness should have lived, he found himself standing at the courtyard's edge once more. The tower leaned now, beams warped by time and rain. How birds cried from the mews, only wind hissed through broken shutters. He stepped inside, hand-brushing the old perches, feathers still caught in the cracks of the floorboards. Outside, dawn spread slow across the stones, warming nothing. In the stable beyond, horses shifted in their stalls. Unaware of the man staring at the tower that had taught him how blame could weigh more than a hawk on the glove, somewhere in the underbrush, a real falcon called to its mate, free, wild, beyond any father's reach. The courtyard stones remember, the tower remembers. The air holds the last echo of the boy's breath as he let the latch fall. The feathers drift, still in dreams, soft as sleep, sharp as the truth left behind. Right? In the next hush, Follow the steps down to a plague hospital, where a father's promise was cut open like a wound that never closed. They said he spoke to the well when the cider turned him sour. Leaning over the stone lip, his words dropping into the water like seeds that would never sprout. Sometimes he cursed his luck. Sometimes he cursed the sons who never worked hard enough, the daughters who never looked him in the eye. When the drink bit deepest, he let his anger slip like a coin into the dark, each splash a wish he'd never dare make in daylight. One harvest night, when the moon lay thin as a sickle above the orchard, his youngest boy crept close. The child's feet were bare, the hem of his nightshirt trailing through fallen apples. He stood just out of reach of his father's shadow, breath steaming in the chill. The father's voice floated up from the well, slurred with cider, thick with words too heavy for a child to carry. He spoke of a debt owed to men from the village, of a promise he had made that would fall to the boy when the apples turned sweet again. The child heard his name. He heard the rope creak where his father leaned too far, saw the bucket slip its hook and splash below. Then he saw the father's boots shift at the edge, a single slip, a hollow splash, and the orchard fell silent. But for the rustle of leaves and the slow drip of water against stone, when dawn cracked open the orchard's frost, the boy sat by the well's mouth, legs pulled tight to his chest. He did not cry. He only listened for the voice that might rise again, bubbling up through the chill water, begging him to pull it free. But the well held its secret, as it always had, deep and dark. Roots and bones tangled at its base, apples bobbing where light would never reach. Years turned the orchard wild, the trees spread thick and gnarled, their fruit falling to rot in the grass. Children who found the well on dare nights dropped pebbles down its throat, counting heartbeats until the splash. They said if you pressed your ear to the stones, you could hear a father's voice still cursing his name, echoing beneath the roots where the orchard remembers what a house sometimes forgets. Now in this hush, the wind shakes loose another apple. It rolls near the well's lip, bruised and soft, and settles among the moss. The water below sighs, carrying the last of his whispers out toward the orchard gate. Sleep comes easy here, under boughs heavy with old grief and the sweetness of decay. Leave the well behind. Follow the lantern's glow to the widow's cottage at the orchard's edge, where a tithing man's last visit bruised the floorboards forever. At the orchard's edge, where the trees thin and the brambles give way to rough heather and low stone walls, the widow's cottage slouches against the earth like an old mare too tired to stand. Its thatched roof sags in the middle, heavy with rainwater and the weight of winters spent waiting for footsteps that never brought comfort through the door. The chimney smokes only when driftwood is found, and the hearth inside burns more memory than flame. She lived here alone but for a child asleep on a pallet near the hearth. Her husband, buried 2 seasons past beneath a crooked cross, left her with little more than a patch of orchard to glean windfalls, and a door that could not keep out the cold. Yet even here, where want perched on every windowsill, father's shadow lingered. Not the child's father, gone to the grave with cider on his breath, but the tithing man who came each month with his ledger, his purse strings, and the hunger in his eyes that no cross could scare away. He was father to a house full of his own children in the village proper. A fine wife who stitched his collars and told herself his duties kept him late at night. But the tithe was due, and the orchard never bore enough to keep the ledger from bleeding red. So the widow folded her hands, smoothing the apron across her lap, the fabric soft from washing but never quite clean of cider stains and ash. She offered him what coin she could, a few bent pennies, a handful of withered apples, a promise of more come spring. But spring is a far promise to a man who wants warmth in winter. He settled his purse on the table, fingers drumming near the ledger's ink. Outside, the wind battered the shutters like a beggar asking to be let in. Inside, the child slept, his tiny hand curled around a wooden carving of a bird his real father had once whittled on a good day. Before the drink turned his voice sharp and his shoulders heavy. When the boy stirred, he heard the floorboards creak beneath the tithing man's boots. He heard his mother's soft plea, softer than the wind under the door. He heard the ledger slap shut, a promise paid in a currency that would not feed them come morning. The fire cracked. The boy pressed the bird carving to his cheek, breath shallow as candlelight. When dawn slipped through the broken shutter, the tithing man was gone, his boots leaving muddy prints that led away from the doorstep, across the frost-slicked grass, back to the village, where his own sons waited for bread bought with another child's hunger. The widow knelt at the hearth, her hair loose over her shoulders, eyes fixed on the ashes where a single coal pulsed weakly, waiting for a breath that would not come. The child rose, padding across the cold floor, careful not to wake the floorboard's groans. He placed the wooden bird on the windowsill, its beak pointed toward the orchard where secrets sink into the well and roots twist around old bones. He did not look at the ledger resting near the hearth. Open now, its pages smudged with damp and something darker. The wind carried the orchard's scent through the cottage, bruised apples, wet thatch, wood smoke long since gone out. The boy stood by the window until the sun climbed high enough to brush warmth against his cheek, waited for his mother to speak, but her words had been given away with the last of the tithe. Now the cottage sinks deeper each year, its roof a cradle for crows and weeds. Children dare each other to press an ear to the door, to hear the whispers that slip between the beams when night comes down like a blanket too thin for comfort. They say the tithing man's steps still echo here, boots scraping the hearth. Ledger closing over promises that taste like sorrow and bitter cider. Beyond the orchard, another chimney waits. The blacksmith's forge glows in the dusk, sparks leaping like fireflies as the hammer falls on anvil. There, another father stands, shoulders broad, eyes narrowed at the glow that never warms his son. The blacksmith's forge sat at the far bend of the muddy lane, its low stone walls scorched black from years of fire that never truly slept. Even at midnight, when the village roofs glistened with dew and the fields lay hushed under a veil of drifting mist, how the forge pulsed red like a wounded heart. Sparks leaped at the anvil's edge, tiny embers flaring before falling to the dirt where they died as quickly as they were born. Inside, the blacksmith worked alone. His hammer rose and fell in steady rhythm, each strike a word in a language older than the stones in the chapel yard. The air smelled of iron and sweat, singed hair and scorched leather. The smell that settled deep into the beams overhead and the sleeves of the boy who waited at the door. The boy was thin where his father was wide, quiet where his father's breath filled the forge like thunder. He had hands raw from pumping the bellows, wrists bruised where tongs pinched too tight. At first he had watched every swing of the hammer with wide eyes, believing the heat might shape him strong as a blade or straight as a nail. But over the years the boy learned what the forge truly shaped, not just plowshares and horseshoes, but the hush that sank between father and son when the hammer fell too hard. They said the blacksmith's wife had fled in a storm, apron strings trailing behind like a pennant of surrender. They said she left the boy behind as penance, a scrap of guilt the smith could temper in his fire when the drink ran low and the coins grew scarce. Some nights the hammer struck not iron, but the rough edge of a bench, sending splinters flying like angry wasps. The boy learned to duck before the blow landed. He learned to keep his feet light on the ashlick floor. One night, when winter pressed its icy hand against the forge walls, the boy dared to speak.
Owls.
His voice barely rose above the hiss of iron plunged into the quench. He asked if they might close the shutter early, bank the fire, rest while the frost clung to the windows like ghosts begging to be let in. The hammer fell still. The blacksmith turned, eyes bleary with ale and sweat, the heat of the forge painting shadows across the raw plane of his face. For a moment, the boy saw a flicker there, something like regret or memory, or the ache of a man who knew no other life, but the constant pounding of metal against metal. But the hammer rose again, struck the anvil with a sound sharp enough to split the boy's question in two. So he waited by the door until dawn, eyes fixed on the dying coals. When the forge finally settled into silence, the boy's shoulders sagged under the weight of words never spoken. He crept into the corner, curling up on a pile of old burlap sacks that smelled of soot and scorched dreams. In sleep, the hammer rang on in his ears, each strike a promise that tomorrow would bring the same heat, the same hush, the same heavy silence that no fire could melt. Years later, villagers who passed the old forge at dusk said they sometimes saw a flicker in the window, not flame, but the pale shape of a boy bending over a cold anvil, palms outstretched as if to catch the last warmth from embers that no father's hands could ever tend again. Outside, the lane curves toward the chapel ruins on the hill, where stone arches yawn at the sky, and a father's vow once lay buried beneath crumbling mortar and candle wax. The hammer's echo fades there, carried off on the night wind like a spark, too small to light the dark. Follow it now to the lost chapel, where a vow once spoken turned to dust in a child's clenched fist. The chapel perched on the hill above the village like a cracked tooth, like stone arches crumbling into the weeds that pressed up from graves long since forgotten. Once it had been a refuge, a hush of candles and whispered prayers, a place where the lonely clutched their rosaries tight and fathers brought their sons to kneel on cold flagstones, hoping confession might mend what they themselves had broken. But the roof caved in one winter when the snows came heavy, and now only the hollowed bell tower kept watch over the broken pews and lichen-slick altar. He had stood there once, a father with his boy at his side, the child's hand small in his rough palm. They were alone at dawn, breath blooming in the chill like ghost smoke. He had sworn an oath then, one that was meant to seal the cracks that drink and lies and absence had left in his son's chest. His voice raw from nights spent shouting behind shuttered doors, found a soft place in the shadows beneath the vaulted ceiling. He promised the boy he would change. We would lay down the bottle, mend the roof, keep the fire banked all through winter's bite. He would be the father he should have been when the boy first drew breath in the corner of a one-room cottage, his cries muffled by the roar of a man too frightened to hold what he had made. The boy listened, eyes wide, fingers tracing the grooves in the stone where pilgrims had once knelt. He wanted to believe, wanted it so badly that he let his forehead rest against his father's knee, breathing in the scent of frost and old sweat, the warmth of the promise wrapping around his ribs like a blanket against the wind. But a vow made in ruin is too easily swallowed by the ruin itself. The father's oath slipped through the chapel's cracked walls, drifted into the eaves, where barn owls watched with yellow eyes, and was lost to the cold before they ever stepped back down the hill. By the time the boy reached the cottage door, the bottle was already half empty on the table. The father's boots sat by the hearth, dripping melted snow, but the fire never caught. The boy lay on his pallet, listening to the wind push against the shutters like a beggar asking to be let in. Years blurred the vow into a memory so thin it might have been a dream. The chapel fell stone by stone into the earth, the altar split by frost and roots. Some nights, when the wind rose from the hollow below the hill, villagers claimed they heard footsteps on the broken floor, the scuff of a child's bare feet, the low rumble of a father's voice, too faint to be trusted. Now the graves lean against each other like tired shoulders, the names worn smooth by moss and time. Wild flowers nod in the cracks, pale and thin as the promises once whispered here, in the chapel's heart, where moonlight pools through the broken roof. The ghost of a father's vow lies curled like a child asleep, waiting for a dawn that will never come. Let the vow rest. Let the wind carry its shreds down the hill, across the stone bridge where shadows gather near the river's edge, a place where blame drifts like fallen leaves, swirling around boots that once carried a father home too late to be forgiven. The stone bridge arched over the river like the spine of an old animal, its worn cobbles slick with moss where the current licked at the pilings below. By daylight, villagers crossed it with baskets slung low, eyes down to watch for cracks in the mortar that had outlived more than a few generations of soft promises and harder goodbyes. But at night, when mist rose from the river and the moon turned the water silver and sharp, the bridge remembered other footsteps, slow, heavy, a father's boots dragging a shame that weighed more than any sack of grain. He had lived in the cottage near the bend, where the willows dipped their branches low enough to hide secrets under the surface. They said he'd once been a man worth trusting, broad back bent in the fields, rough hands lifting his boy to the thatch roof when the storms came, pointing out stars that flickered behind ragged clouds. But seasons turn, crops fail, and debt slips through the door like a draft that never leaves. He found comfort in a clay jug, a sip to keep the frost at bay, another to hush the child's small questions about whether the rent would ever be paid. One autumn night, when the wind pushed the river into dark ripples and the willows scraped the cottage window like fingernails, he stumbled out into the lane, the boy trailing behind him barefoot, breath white in the cold. He promised they'd find help in the village, a friend who might lend coin enough to keep the landlord from the threshold. The bridge waited for them at the lane's end, its stones slick with drizzle and moonlight. Halfway across, the boy stopped. He felt the pull of the water below, the hush of it tempting him to speak a truth he could no longer keep pressed behind his teeth. He asked where the money had gone. the coins that clinked in the father's pocket only days before. He asked why the jug always emptied before the cupboard could be filled. The father turned then, his face a pale mask beneath the lantern's sway. The boy saw the crack of regret in the man's eyes, but regret is cold comfort on a bridge at midnight. Words slurred into apologies, apologies into anger. Anger into the hush that falls when boots slip on moss and hands reach for the railing too late. The splash echoed down the river like a church bell tolling for no soul but his own. The boy leaned over the edge, breath caught in his throat. Eyes fixed on the shape drifting beneath the current. A ghost already, pulled into the reeds where willows bend to listen. When the villagers found him at dawn, curled in the frost near the bridge's arch, his lips were blue, but his eyes stayed open, searching the river for a father who would never crawl back up the bank. Years later, travelers crossing the bridge at dusk said they felt the chill cling to their boots, water seeping up through stone to remind them what the river still held. Some claimed they saw a figure below the arch, a man's shape tangled in roots. Boots caught in the reeds, eyes wide with a sorrow the current never washed away. The river flows on. The bridge sags under the weight of every step that crosses from what was to what might have been. And in the hush before dawn, when mist curls low over the banks, the stone hums with the memory of a boy's question, unanswered still. Leave the bridge behind now. Let the river carry its secrets to the mill house farther down the bank, where a single candle flickers in a window, and a daughter waits for a father who never knocks, but always finds his way in. The mill house crouched at the bend where the river slowed, its wheel creaking through the night like an old song that no one cared to remember. The stones were slick with moss, and the drift of flour dust that clung to the beams, even when the millstones ground to a halt. In the upstairs window, a single candle burned, its flame bending in the draft that rattled loose shutters and made the timbers groan like sleepers turning in a restless dream. She waited there, the miller's daughter, a thin scrap of a girl with eyes grown old from watching the river rise and fall through the seasons. The hearth below had gone cold hours ago, but she dared not stir the embers for fear of waking shadows that prowled just beyond the threshold. Her father was supposed to be away, driving sacks of grain to the Lord's granary, 2 villages down. Yet some nights, when the wheel groaned and the river hushed its chatter, his boots found their way back across the footbridge without warning. He was a father in name only. The wheel turned more true than he did, grinding what little they had into bread they rarely tasted. The coin he earned never stayed in the locked box by the hearth. Always it slipped into another man's hand in the tavern, where the air thickened with pipe smoke and broken wagers. When the purse was empty, his fists found their mark on walls and doors, sometimes on the fragile hope that flickered behind his daughter's eyes. The girl learned to listen for the wheel's rhythm, the way it changed when boots thudded across the mill yard, mud dripping from the planks. If it fell silent too soon, she would slip her candle behind the shutters, pressing her palm to the cracked glass so the flame cast no glow to guide him. She would draw her knees tight to her chest, tucking her breath deep into her ribs, as if he might not find it there. One night, when the river ran high and the wheel spun faster than she'd ever heard, he stumbled through the door without a sack of grain or a single coin to show for his journey. His eyes, red-rimmed and slick with drink, caught the candle's tremor on the stair. She heard the hinge creak under his hand, the stair groan as he climbed. She wished the wheel would drown the sound, wished the river would rise up through the mill race and swallow them both whole. But fathers like that do not drown easy. They cling to the bank, drag their ghosts behind them like a chain of old debts. He found her sitting cross-legged on the pallet, the candle guttering between them. He did not speak. He did not need to. The hush of his boots on the floorboards told her every word she would have rather not heard. When dawn came, the wheel spun, slow and steady again, creaking beneath a load of wet leaves and driftwood caught in its paddles. The river's hush wrapped the mill house tight, its banks swollen with rain that washed the footprints from the yard. She rose to light another candle. Wax pooled in the cracked saucer where the first flame had died. They say the mill wheel still turns on nights when the river rises high, its groan drifting through the village like the breath of something half asleep, half waiting. A single candle sometimes flickers in the topmost window, its flame bending toward the river as if to mark the way for boots that never stop crossing back and forth from darkness to door. In the hush of that turning wheel, The stones remember. The echo of heavy steps, the hush of breath held tight beneath a thin blanket. The warmth of a flame too small to keep the shadows out. Let the mill wheel turn without you tonight. Drift past its grown toward the ruined keep that crumbles above the field, where a crown once bent a father's spine until the gold turned to rust. The ruined keep rises out of the bramble-choked hillside, like the spine of some ancient beast, its crumbling battlements clawing at the sky that never loved it back. Moss creeps along the stones, softening the sharp edges where archers once stood watch. Boughs slacken hands, grow numb from wind and waiting. Beneath what remains of the high tower, a narrow archway yawns into darkness, cold as a king's broken promise. They called him a lord once, a father crowned not by birthright, but by cunning and blade. The sort of man who'd gut a stag before dawn and break bread with the priests by dusk. He wore his crown too tight, thin band of iron that pressed a promise into his skull, that what he built would never fall, that the sons born beneath his banner would rise higher than he ever dared. But the walls know what pride costs. He sired them one by one, heirs to a name that clung like frost to the stone lintels, sons who learned early to stand silent at his table, eyes fixed on the flicker of the torchlight, so they would not see the cruelties pass between cup and knife. His youngest, the one they called the lamb for the softness in his eyes, wandered the keep at night, footsteps muffled by rushes scattered on floors that never stayed warm enough to hush the ache in his chest. One winter's eve, when the winds curled through the arrow slits and the hearth sputtered under damp logs, the boy found his father alone in the great hall. The crown sat askew on the old man's brow, shadowed by the glow of dying embers. Gold coins spilled from a chest cracked open by rust and neglect, each one a promise squandered on bribes and bargains that never came true. The boy spoke then, words caught behind his ribs too long. He asked if the crown would fit his head when the time came, if the stones would hold for him when they had failed to hold for the father, who could no longer stand straight beneath their weight. The old man looked up, eyes bleary with wine, seeing not the boy but the long line of sons who had left these halls empty. One by one, two plague, two steel, two the hush of woods that swallowed the sound of footfalls forever, a hand rose. Not gentle, never gentle. Fingers brushed the boy's cheek, leaving a smear of grease and regret behind. The crown slid forward, catching on a tangle of hair before clattering to the floor. Its ring echoed up into the rafters, where bats stirred, dropping a flurry of dust-like petals onto the stone flags below. By dawn, the boy was gone, footsteps winding down the frost-bitten path to the river, where reeds tangled around the dreams of better sons. The father sat slumped in the chair, crown at his feet, coins scattered like teeth pulled from a corpse too poor for burial. Years later, when storms rattle the battlements and winds slip through the keep's hollows, travelers swear they hear it, the clink of iron rolling across stone. Soft question of a child's voice, asking if the weight of gold is lighter than the burden of a father's love gone sour. The crown lies there still, half buried beneath fallen beams and bramble, cold to the touch and empty of promise. Above it, the keep sighs under moonlight, stone bones creaking with the memory of a name that never quite fit the brow it bruised. Turn away now, down the winding stair that leads to the steward's attic, where a hush thicker than dust keeps watch over secrets too heavy to sweep away. Up the narrow stair, where each step creaks like a throat clearing words it dare not speak. The steward's attic waits beneath the thatch and timber bones of the old manor house. In summer, heat pools beneath the rafters until sweat drips onto the ledger pages below. In winter, wind weaves through the beams, curling around old trunks, boxes, and the ghosts of promises left to sour in the dark. He was the steward once, a father to a single child and to a household that knew him by his heavy ring of keys in the hush, his steps, when the master's boots rattled the hall. He kept accounts as tight as a fist, every penny marked in neat columns, every debt recorded twice. Once in ink and once in the hollow of his chest, where guilt lodged like a splinter. In the attic, he kept the ledgers he did not show, the pages that told of meat cut thin so the master's plate brimmed full, while the kitchen girl's apron pockets went empty. A candle stub, a slip of paper, broken lock. Tiny betrayals tucked into the rafters where no eye but his sons might find them. The boy would come up sometimes, feet bare on the splintered floorboards, eyes wide with the wonder of secrets stacked in boxes tied with twine. He'd ask why the coins weighed heavier when the servants wept downstairs for bread. He'd press his ear to the trunks, listening for the heartbeats of a kindness never paid in silver. One dusk, when the harvest wagons rattled away and the manor gates creaked on their hinges, the boy found a ledger left open by the attic window. Outside, the orchard bent low with apples no one would pick for the kitchen's empty pots. Inside, his father sat on a chest, thumb tracing the edge of a single gold coin, the last ode to a mother long gone to clay. The boy asked if the coin would buy back the truth. The steward looked up, eyes hollowed by candlelight and the weight of accounts no man could balance. His answer came not in words but in the hush that fell when the window shutter banged open, scattering pages like startled birds. When winter came, the boy left, gone before dawn, a knapsack of bread crusts and the ledger with the empty columns folded against his chest. The attic door stayed bolted for years after, the steward's feet never again finding the stair in the dark. Now the manor sags beneath ivy and silence. The attic beams groan when the wind presses against the eaves, whispering questions that never make it down to the hearth below. Children who dare to climb the stair press their palms to the old trunks, listening for a heartbeat in the dark. A father's regret, a son's small gasp, when he learned that some debts will never be repaid in coin. Beyond the attic's hush, the fields stretch out beneath a pale moon. Furrows lined with frost and the ghosts of harvest stolen one whisper at a time. Follow their furrows now to the wide, stubbled plain, where bread and betrayal once rose side by side in the cold light of a harvest dawn. The harvest field lay spread beneath a sky the color of bruised linen, the last stalks of barley shivering in a wind that smelled of earth turned too late.
Stacking rows of stubbles ditched the land into neat lines.
But nothing could tame the hush that fell here after the last sheaf was bound and the carts rattled away. Out. Even now, when the fields sleep under frost, the air tastes of sweat and old secrets pressed deep into the soil by boots that never knew how to tread lightly. He was a farmer by trade, a father by birthright, though neither title sat easy on his shoulders. All season, he walked these furrows at dawn. Fists buried in pockets that jingled with coins, borrowed against a yield that always fell short. His sons trailed behind him, eyes rimmed red from nights spent mending what his temper split. Fence rails cracked beneath the swing of a spade, sacks torn when the ale turned sharp in his belly. At the harvest's end, the villagers gathered in the field's heart, a ring of bent backs and blistered palms, each pair of eyes watching as the father took his share from the bushels he'd promised to divide fair. The bread baked from that grain would line the tables of men who had bartered sweat for every handful. But sweat means little to a father whose tongue knows only the taste of taking. Under the weight of the sons slow dying, he shorted them by handfuls at a time. A measure here, a scoop there, till his sacks bulged richer than any prayer whispered over dry furrows. The boys saw it, but their mouths stayed shut, teeth pressed to cracked lips, eyes on the ruts worn deep by the harvest cart. Each loaf risen from that theft tasted of ash when they bit into it by the hearth. One night, as the moon swelled yellow over the field's rim, the oldest boy took the bread knife from its peg by the hearth. He slipped from the cottage, feet hushed in the ruts his father's boots had carved all season. The fields glowed pale with mist, rows bending like old men's spines under the weight of secrets they had no place to keep. At the center, where the ground still held the warmth of fire pits long gone out, the boy buried the knife point down in the soft dirt, a promise that the line would break here. No father's bargain would steal another harvest's hope. By dawn, the father found the empty peg, the cold ashes in the hearth, the quiet where his son's questions used to tremble. He searched the rows until frost crusted his beard, but the furrows gave up nothing. Not a track, not a word, not the blade that split the hush like a bell's toll. Only the wind answered, hissing through barley stubble, carrying his curses down to the next village where bread might yet rise without betrayal kneaded in. Now, the field sleeps under frost so thick it crunches under boot soles like dry bones. In spring, new shoots will push through the old rows, roots tangled around secrets that never rot. At dusk, those who pass the hedgerow say they see a thin figure walking the furrows. Hands empty but for the hush that binds a promise tighter than any blade. Leave the field to its dreaming. Follow the path that curves past the old gatehouse at the road's edge, where a guard once leaned on a pike, and learned too late how regret can stand watch long after a door has closed. The old gatehouse squats at the bend where the road slips into the forest's dark mouth, its stones mottled with lichen and the soot of torches long snuffed out. Moss creeps up the walls where a lantern once swung, marking the threshold between safety and the hush of wolves and men who wait in the thicket for boots that wander too far from firelight. The door still hangs crooked on iron hinges, but no guard leans there now to nod a traveler through. He was the warden of that post once, a father to a boy who never asked to be born beneath a roof that smelled of damp straw and last night's stew gone cold. By day, the father's spear rested easy in his palm, a symbol of duty, protection, a promise he told himself he kept for the good of all who passed beneath the arched gate. By night, the spear leaned in the corner, and the mug replaced it. Warm and heavy with ale strong enough to drown the memory of coin taken where coin should not have been asked. The boy knew the rhythm of those nights. How the lantern flame would gutter when his father's boots dragged across the threshold. How the purse strings tied tight at dusk would hang limp and empty come dawn. He learned to make himself small on the pallet by the hearth, tracing the flicker of firelight across the cracked ceiling, listening for the hush that came just before the door scraped open again. One autumn, when the wind rattled the shutter like old bones, and the woods pressed close with the smell of wet leaves and fox musk, the boy sat up by the hearth. He asked his father what became of the silver meant to pay the tithes on the field they'd never till. The father's laugh was thin, a wheeze more than a sound, but it carried the weight of every coin spent on drink. Every blade turned away at the gatehouse, when strangers pressed a palm too heavy with promise. He told the boy it was for the best, that silver slips through honest hands quicker than it does a liar's fist, that the forest would always hunger for the lost, and the gatehouse's door could only hold the dark back so long. But the boy saw what the torchlight revealed, the droop of the father's shoulders, the looseness in his grip where the spear should have been steady. The boy rose then, feet bare on the dirt floor, and pressed a small hand to the guard's rough knuckles, feeling how regret trembled there, like a pulse that could never be stilled. When morning broke pale over the road, the father found the spear propped by the gate, its tip rusted from a night left in rain. The boy's pallet lay cold, blanket folded, a single coin tucked beneath a cracked mug on the hearthstone. The door swung in the wind like an unanswered question. He stepped outside, boots sinking into the mud, eyes straining for any sign of footsteps weaving into the trees. But the road held only silence, the hush of the forest swallowing a son who would never again cross beneath the gate his father had failed to guard. Now, the gatehouse leans deeper into the earth each year, its stones split by roots that remember every word unsaid, every coin spent on warmth that never reached the boy's bones. Sometimes at dusk, when the torchlight would once have glowed golden on passing carts, travelers see a figure standing by the crooked door, a man's shadow bent under the weight of regret. Spear held like an apology that can never be spoken aloud. Leave him to his vigil. Let the wind carry your steps onward, along the frozen road where hooves once struck, sparks from stone, and a father's promise slipped away on the breath of snow. The frozen road wound like a pale ribbon through the bare hills, its ruts glazed with ice that caught the moon's cold grin. In winter, wagons left it behind, their iron wheels too timid to risk the slick descent into the valley below. But horses with hooves, sharp as knives, and riders with debts tied tight in their breast pockets. They braved its curves long after the last hearth fire flickered out. He was a carter when the harvest failed, a father to a single girl who waited by the window for the sound of hooves striking sparks from the stones. His wagon rattled between villages, hauling crates of salt and sacks of barley he'd promised to men who had no reason to trust him. Every mile he rode bought him another day free from the knock on the door that would claim the house. The plow, the small rough hand that tugged at his sleeve when night settled its cold weight on the thatch roof. One bitter dusk, with snow sifting down like sifted flour over the fields, he promised her he'd be back before the frost bit through the shutters. He pressed his cracked lips to her temple and promised the road was steady, the horse sure-footed, the coins certain to buy enough grain to keep her belly warm until spring. She watched him go from the crooked porch, his shape swallowed by the swirl of flakes that made ghosts of the hedgerows. Halfway up the frozen road, the wind turned spiteful, driving snow sideways into the hollows between fence posts and drifts that swallowed wagon wheels whole. The horse stumbled where the ruts glazed to glass, iron shoes striking sparks that flickered out before they could catch. The father's breath rattled around old prayers, whispered bargains with saints he had no right to name, promises that the load behind him would see them both safe to dawn. But the road never cared for promises made on cracked lips. A wheel slipped from its frozen rut, lurching the wagon sideways. The horse reared, snorting clouds into the night. And the father's hands, so steady on reins turned slick with sleet, lost their grip on the only line tying him home. They found the wagon come dawn, axle buried in a drift, like a grave too shallow for secrets. The crate split open, salt scattered across the snow like tears that burned the eyes raw. No sign of the horse, no sign of the father, only footprints leading up the road's highest bend, then vanishing into the wind's white mouth. Some say he staggered on, boots crunching over frostbitten stone, his last promise clutched like a coin too thin to spend. Some say the road kept him, folding him into its hush so his daughter's tears would freeze before they ever struck the hearth. Back at the cottage, the girl sat by the window long after the snow turned to slush. Each hoofbeat she imagined was a heartbeat, each gust against the shutters a hand come to knock, a voice to say the road had given up what it took. But the frozen path curled on, mile after mile, through hills and hollows that remember the warmth of hooves, but never the weight of a father's vow undone by the drift. Now, when snow lays thick on the old stones and travelers pause to rest their horses at the crossroads shrine, they swear they hear it. The soft ring of iron on ice, the hush of boots treading a promise into the dark. Let the frozen road drift behind your sleep. Follow instead the scent of smoke to the banquet hall on the hill, where laughter curdled into poison and a father's final toast burned colder than any winter could. The banquet hall perched high above the village like a torch that never truly warmed the valley below. Its stone walls, veined with soot from centuries of feasts, hold the echo of laughter that once rose up to the rafters like the crackle of a fire too bright to trust. Long tables run the length of the chamber, planks scarred by knives and spilled wine, wax dripped into rivers along the grain. Some nights, when the wind slides through the broken shutters, the candles gutter on their stubs, as if waiting for guests who will never knock again. He was lord of that hall, father to 3 sons who learned early that a father's cup could hold more than wine. Bitterness, steeped deeper than any cask left to rest in the cellar's cold dark. By day he spoke of loyalty and legacy, of how each boy must hold the family's name above their own hunger. By night the goblet never left his hand, and the words turned sour. Bruised by secrets whispered too close to the ear, too far from any truth a child could carry to bed unbroken. One winter's eve, when the first flakes clung like ghosts to the mullioned windows, he called them all to the great table. A feast, he promised, a toast to bind them tight as blood should. The servants shuffled in with trenchers piled high, venison swimming in dark gravy, bread loaves split open like wounds, red apples gleaming in the candlelight. The sons sat shoulder to shoulder, eyes flicking from the father's cup to each other's clenched hands beneath the table. He raised his goblet high. In the wavering glow, the wine shone almost black. He spoke of sacrifice, of duty, of how a father must sometimes test his sons, to see which would hold the dagger when the hall fell quiet and the flames burned low. They drank when he told them to drink, each sip a bargain swallowed hard. One son flinched at the taste, a bitterness that clung to his tongue like old grief. Another hesitated, watching the father's eyes glitter with something darker than torchlight. It was the youngest who dropped his goblet first, the pewter rim clattering against the flagstones, wine spreading like a bruise across the rushes. He knew the stories the servants told, of poison mixed with blessings, of a father's hunger to see which child might kneel at his feet, lips blue with devotion. But no prayer spilled from the father's mouth that night, only a toast curdled by secrets left too long in the cask. When dawn came, the hall stood silent, but for the crackle of embers dying in the hearth. The long table sagged beneath half-eaten platters, apple cores browning in the cold. Of the sons, only 2 rose from the benches, legs trembling, eyes fixed on the father's goblet still tipped where it had rolled from his hand. His head lay slumped against the chairback, mouth parted as if to speak one last promise that never found the air. They buried him beneath the flagstones, sealing the poison in with the bones. The goblet vanished. Some say melted down to nothing, others that it waits still, hidden behind the stones of the hearth, waiting for another hand to lift it, to test another vow. On storm nights, when wind batters the shutters and the old hall creaks like a throat clearing its sorrow, villagers passing below swear they see figures at the high table, sons who sit in silence, goblets full but untouched, staring down at the father who taught them how to drink betrayal from a cup shaped like love. Step softly now, down the servants' stair to the hunter's lodge deep in the forest's throat, where hounds dream of blood and a father's cruelty curls close around the coals. The hunter's lodge squats in the hollow of the forest, its timbers warped by damp and the long ache of forgotten winters. Smoke curls from the stone chimney only when the wind does not tear it away, dragging the scent of ash and fir into the dark tangle of pines. Around the lodge, paw prints circle in the mud, hounds restless for the trail, muzzles lifted to a sky that never answers back. Inside, the hearth glows low, its light flickering over racks of antlers nailed to the beams like a crown that never fit any king. He was a hunter by trade, a father by blood alone, claimed the forest as his realm, every born stag a tribute paid in sinew and bone. But for his son, the woods were not a kingdom, but a cage of shadows and rustling. Branches that carried every echo of his father's boots crunching across frost. The boy followed at a distance on the hunts, small legs struggling through drifts where the father's stride cut deep and sure. His hands were too soft for bowstring, his breath too loud for any deer to trust. In the lodge, the boy slept on a pallet near the door, listening for the snarl of the hounds chained by the hearth. They whined in their sleep, paws twitching on dreams of blood and chase, while the father's knife rested by his pillow, its edge clean, its promise sharper than any word he spoke by firelight. Sometimes, when the father returned late with a stag slung over his shoulders, he'd toss a scrap to the hounds before the boy, watching how teeth tore the meat apart while the child's belly stayed hollow. One night, when snow pressed thick against the windows and the hounds curled close for warmth, the boy dared to touch the father's bow. He drew it halfway, breath held so tight in his chest he thought he might burst before the string gave under his trembling fingers. The arrow skittered across the hearthstones, rattling like a dry laugh. The father's eyes opened then, pale and cold in the glow. He did not shout. He did not strike. He simply clicked his tongue, and the hounds lifted their heads as one yellow eyes fixed on the boy's bare feet. Outside, the wind carried the smell of wolf spoor and the promise of dawn far from kind. The boy slipped from the lodge before the fire died, footsteps muffled by snow that swallowed his tracks as quick as he made them. The father rose at first light, boots pulled on slow, knife tucked into his belt. He whistled the hounds to heel and pushed open the door to a hush so deep even the birds dared not break it. No sign of boy or boot print, only the smell of pine and the thin wail of wind through the shutter left swinging on its hinge. They say the father still hunts these woods when the moon waxes thin, his hounds pacing circles round the lodge, where the hearth glows just bright enough to show the pallet where no child curls anymore. Sometimes a branch snaps in the underbrush, a footstep too light for any beast. The hounds bristle, tails low, ears pressed flat as if they hear the soft pad of a boy's bare feet slipping just out of reach. Beyond the lodge, the forest breathes its secrets into the black soil. Roots winding around bones and stories that never find their way to firelight. Leave the hounds to their restless sleep. Drift instead toward the bell tower that pierces the dawn, its stones humming with the name of a father who could never quite silence the echo of what he'd done. The bell tower stands crooked above the chapel ruins, its stones eaten by moss and the slow drip of centuries' rain, where the bells once tolled for births, for deaths. For the hush that settled over the graveyard at dusk, now they hang silent, green with lichen, edges chipped where crows perch to watch the village breathe below. Some nights, when the wind claws through the tower's narrow slits, the clapper sways just enough to whisper a single hollow note that drifts across the rooftops like a prayer, with no one left to speak it. He was the bellkeeper once, a father who climbed the spiral stair every dawn to ring in the sun. to mark the hour when children should rise from straw pallets and men should lay hammer to anvil. In the village square they said he was a good man, a faithful man, father whose voice wrapped warm around his daughter's shoulders when the night stretched too long. But the tower stones remember what the square does not, the hush that slipped through the belfry door when his feet fell heavy on the creaking planks, the way the rope left burns on his palms when the drink loosened his grip. His daughter knew each rung of that stair by heart, the squeal of the third step, the splinter that caught her hem just below the narrow window where morning light spilled like honey across cold stone. She'd sit near the bell rope, braid coiled around her fingers, waiting for the rumble of his boots behind her. Some nights, when the stars burned clear, he'd gather her in his arms and lift her high enough to touch the bell's cold rim. A game, she thought then, to make her brave for the heights he loved so much. But the drink soured his voice like milk left in the sun. Words slurred from blessing to blame, the tower turning from cradle to cage. One winter night, when the river below lay frozen thick as a tomb, he pulled her up the stair with hands that trembled around her wrist. He spoke her name like a question, like a curse, like a wish he could not bear to swallow. The bell above them swayed in the wind, groaning on its iron yoke, as if it too wished to hush the words that fell from his mouth and shattered against the stones. No one knows if she slipped, or if the hush that filled the tower carried her down to the graveyard below. The snow swallowed her shape before dawn, a drift of white so pure it seemed the tower itself had wept her away. They found him there at sunrise, knees in the frost, palms pressed to the rope as if to ring her home again. The bell tolled once, clear and bright and sharp enough to wake the crows from the chapel eaves. Then it fell silent, its voice gone hollow as the name he'd lost to the wind. Years later, when the first frost curls around the graveyard gate, children swear they hear it. The low echo of a single note. The soft pad of small feet on the stair that ends at the belfry's mouth. They say a father's voice drifts down sometimes too, slurred by years and sorrow, still trying to wring his guilt clean against the stone that remembers everything. Let the tower stand watch now, its bell mouth cracked open to the dawn. Follow the chill wind down the slope to the seawall, where salt spray stains the stones, and a sailor's last goodbye, tastes of brine and broken vows. The seawall clings to the edge of the village like a scar, where the land refuses to give itself up to the tide. Stones worn smooth by centuries of salt and storms press against each other like old bones, slick with seaweed, where the waves slap and hiss. In the hush before dawn, when gulls cry faint and the tide pulls back its skirts of foam, the wall hums with the memory of footsteps that never quite made it home. He was a sailor by trade, a father by chance, or so he told himself, when the wind caught his sails and the harbor lantern faded behind him. Each season he promised he'd be back before the nets rotted, before the child's boots wore through at the toe. The boy waited by the cottage window, a piece of driftwood whittled to a boat cupped in his small palm. The salt breeze whispering of far-off harbors, and the warmth of a father's arms he only half remembered. When the ship pulled in, villagers would see him striding up the quay, boots crusted with brine, pockets jangling with foreign coins. He'd stand at the threshold, eyes soft with promises poured as easily as rum, its voice rolling with tales of whales breaching under moonlight and storms that spoke the name of every man aboard. But the sea never gives without taking back double. The purse emptied fast, the boots turned toward the tavern. The boy's boat lay forgotten in the rushes, where the salt gnawed its hull thin. One night, when the tide swelled higher than it had in a year, the sailor found himself on the sea wall, breath thick with drink, eyes glazed by the lantern's distant swing. The wind pressed at his coat like a beggar's hand, urging him home. But the water below shushed him sweeter than any child's call. He leaned out, peering at the dark line where sea met sky, searching for the shape of the boy's boat he'd never carved straight, the name he'd never stitched into any sail. They say the wall gave way beneath his boots. Or maybe it was his heart that slipped first, heavy with the weight of every promise swallowed by the waves. The sea closed over him without a splash, taking him into the dark hush where sailor sins dissolve like salt on the tongue. In the cottage, the boy waded through the tide's turning, driftwood boat clutched to his chest, ears straining for the latch to lift. Dawn brought only the hush of gulls wheeling above the harbor, the slap of waves against the stone that still holds his father's footsteps pressed tight in its cracks. Now when storms rake the coastline and the seawall hums with the breath of breakers, some swear they see him. Boots slick with weed, eyes hollow as the tide. He walks the length of stone where land meets water, looking for the boy whose name the gulls carry. Faint is the echo of a promise never spoken true. Let the salt air slip from your lungs. Let the wall hold its sorrow while you drift further inland. Toward the graveyard at the village's edge, the forgotten patch where worst fathers sleep, lone beneath tilted stones and weeds that remember every hush that never turned to grace. At the far edge of the village, where the lane narrows to little more than a rutted path of grass and mud, the forgotten graveyard waits behind a gate that no longer swings. Its iron hinges are locked with rust, but the stone wall is low enough for the wind to step across. Carrying whispers through the crooked rows of leaning headstones and slabs worn smooth by centuries of rain and restless roots, here fathers sleep alone, their names half swallowed by moss, their stories drifting through the weeds that press close against the marble. No church bell tolls for this ground. The chapel that once tended its hush stands roofless now, its timbers rotted to brittle bones that sigh when the owl lands on the crossbeam at dusk. Long ago, the village let these plots go wild, bramble tangled in the iron crosses, ivy claiming the carved dates, nettles blooming where prayers never reached. But the soil remembers every footstep that pressed a casket deep, and the wind, brushing through dry grass, hums the lullabies no father ever stayed to sing. One stone near the far wall marks a man who called himself Shepherd too for children. By day, he walked the village with bread tucked under his arm and a smile that soured sweet milk in the churn. By night, his boots found the tavern floor and his fists the threshold when the door swung open to slow. When winter buried the lane in snow, his family buried him without a coin left to spare for the priest's final words. They say the earth opened quick, eager to take him down before his curses turned to ghosts. A few rows over, another slab tilts, cracked through the middle like an old lie come undone. Here sleeps a steward, keeper of ledgers that bled whole households dry. He wrote his sums neat and his secrets neater, the ink of betrayal sinking deep into the parchment he hid beneath attic beams. His son left him to this lonely patch, stones for pillows, weeds for blankets. Some nights, the foxes slip through the grass, nosing at the grave as if they smell the debts rotting slow under the soil. Toward the center, under the crooked branches of a yew that has outlived them all, the smallest stone lies half sunk in clay. Its carving is nearly gone, just a ring of letters softened by rain and wind. A hunter's mark, they say. A father who raised hounds to chase anything that bled, but whose own child slipped through the underbrush faster than any stag could run. On certain foggy nights, those who linger too close swear they hear the low whine of dogs in the distance, paws patting circles around a grave that will never warm. No flowers rest here, no wreaths of holly or rowan to keep the old regrets at bay. Only the wind lays offerings. Twigs a scrap of crow feather and apple core carried from the orchard up the lane. The brambles lean in, stitching themselves around the stones like old guilt that refuses to stay buried. And above it all, the sky spreads wide and empty, cloak of cloud drifting over the last lullaby these fathers will ever know. If sleep comes here, it comes slow, roots winding through bone, pressing forgiveness tight as a shroud. If the names are spoken, they rise only in dreams, carried on the hush of wind that curls around the gate before slipping out to the lanes where new fathers make old mistakes. Let the graveyard hold what it must. Let the weeds stand witness when no one else will. Drift onward now to the last hush, the dawn's lullaby that closes this long night. A soft parting, a breath of rest for eyes that have watched shadows far too long. Dawn creeps in slow over the fields and thatch roofs, brushing the edges of windows where frost flowers bloom and fade before the first kettle sighs over the hearth. The night, with all its heavy stones and hush of old footsteps, loosens its grip by degrees, folding back into the shadows behind shutters that never close quite tight enough to keep it out. Here, in this pale hush, the worst fathers slip back into the earth, their voices caught like mist in the hedgerows, their promises drifting above the mossy graves and cold hearths they left behind. The castle crumbles, its throne empty, but for crows that preen where kings once sat in silence. The cellar door swells against its hinges, secrets pressed deeper into the floorboards where no child's ear waits to catch them now. The orchard well, the mill wheel, the stone bridge, and its dark river. Each hushes itself to sleep again, wrapped in the same gray dawn that bleaches every bruise to memory. Somewhere, a candle guttering on a windowsill still remembers the warmth of a small hand pressed to the glass, watching for boots that never cross the threshold again. The attic, the tower, the cloister walls, all stand soft with dust, their timber beams heavy with the hush of stories they were never meant to keep. Let them drift now. Let the keepers of the forge lay down their hammers. Let the plow rest in frozen furrows. Let the bell hang still in its cracked stone mouth, where the wind brushes it but cannot make it sing. The hounds curl in their straw, noses tucked to tails, dreaming of a whistle that never calls them back. And here, in this quiet corner where the world lies, thin and sleep breathes soft against your ribs, the dawn weaves a blanket from every name spoken in the dark. It wraps around shoulders bent by stories half remembered, a touch light as the first snow on a slate roof, a hush that fills the hollows these fathers left behind. No ghosts linger here to rattle the latch, no footsteps on the stair. Only the hush of your breath and the gentle creak of floorboards settling as the world turns toward its slow waking. Let your eyes grow heavy. Let the candle burn down to a pool of wax, its flicker bowing to the soft gray light. This is all that remains. The hush that follows a promise, the warmth that rises when the door stays closed.
Ow!
The hush that drifts through stone walls and orchard gates, carrying every broken vow far enough that it fades in the wind. Sleep now. The worst of it is done. The hush has you. The dawn hums its lullaby against your chest. Let the world fade. Let the hush hold you. Let the hush hold you. In the soft cradle of that dawn's hush, the village settles deeper into itself. Roofs beaded with dew, chimneys breathing slow spirals of wood smoke into the paling sky. The orchard stands heavy with mist, branches bare. But for the memory of apples that once bruised the earth with secrets, the well waits, stones slick with moss, and the hush of words never pulled back into the light. Behind shuttered windows, the mill wheel sleeps beneath its frost-silvered paddles. The river slides beneath the stone bridge, carrying away the last echo of boots that slipped where blame and forgiveness tangle in the shallows. In the chapel ruins, the bell tower's cracked mouth stays closed. No clang to stir the graves awake, no vow left to break the morning calm. And in that forgotten graveyard at the far end of the lane, bramble curls tighter around the tilting stones, weaving thorny wreaths no hand dares to untangle. Foxes nose the earth for scraps of warmth, their paws pressing soft indentations into soil that remembers. Every father laid down with pockets turned out and names left to weather smooth. Farther out, beyond the fields stiff with frost, the monastery walls stand gray against the soft blush of sunrise. The prayer bell that once rang every hour lies split in the cloister grass, its tongue stilled by rust, its iron mouth kissed by ivy that hides old confessions in green. No footsteps sound in the cloisters now. The hush there is thick and gentle, a shroud that smells of candle wax and stone kept cold for mercy. Somewhere in the keep's crumbling tower, where the crown once pressed a promise into a boy's skull, a single ray of light strikes the empty throne. Dust swirls in that beam, golden motes that dance without name or weight, drifting down to settle where shadows once gathered thick as old betrayal. This dawn knows the worst fathers by heart, their bargains struck beneath cellar doors, their hush pressed into the orchard roots, their promises drowned in rivers that carry all guilt out to sea. But dawn keeps no ledger. It asks no penance. It only breathes over the roofs, through the orchard, over graves and broken walls, humming its soft lullaby for any who wake with regret lodged like a splinter behind the ribs. So breathe here a while, where nothing presses too close, where every worst father slips back into the hush that made them. Let the stories sink like coins tossed into an old well. Ripples, spreading outward until the water calms and the hush is whole again. In the fields, frost melts under the first touch of sun. Hearth fires catch and crackle in the cottages. Warmth weaving up through chimney stacks like an old lullaby rising in the throat. Children shift beneath blankets, their breath soft and slow as the hush curls around them, a promise made not by fathers but by dawn itself. You are here, you are warm, you are safe enough to dream. So dream now. Let the orchard hold its secrets, let the forge grow cold. The bridge stand watch while the river hums your name softer than any vow ever spoken in anger. Sleep, and let the hush hold you. The worst fathers fade with the night. The hush holds you. The hush holds you. Beyond the village edge, the lane fades to little more than two ruts pressed into frost-hardened earth, winding toward fields that will soon breathe green again when spring's soft hand wakes them. For now the dawn drapes its thin gold over stone walls laced with ivy, over the orchard where a single apple hangs, half-rotted, waiting to fall. The hush here is so deep it hums through the roots, through the bones of the well, through the cracked beams of attics where secrets were once tucked away like brittle ledgers. The plague hospital, its windows empty sockets now, holds its hush tight behind stone walls slick with centuries of damp. No cough breaks the stillness, no footsteps echo down its long, cold ward. The cots sit in rows like open palms that never learned how to hold mercy. But the hush has come for them too, folding soft around iron bed frames, pressing kindness into corners where grief once dripped from ceiling beams like water through a cracked roof. At the hunter's lodge, deep in the forest's hush, the hounds lie curled on beds of old pine needles. Their breath plumes the cold air in faint clouds, paws twitching in sleep, as if they chase not blood now, but warmth. The father's boots sit by the hearth, cracked leather sagging inward, their weight as empty as the rooms behind them. Even the knives on the wall seem duller in this light, the hush softening every sharp edge until only the warmth of the coals remains. Up the frozen road, the wagon ruts have filled with meltwater that mirrors the sky's pale blush. Hoofprints dissolve into muddy hollows, the last sign of a promise that never found its way home. The cottage door is shut tight now, Driftwood. Boat resting in the window, its tiny sail trembling in the draft as dawn brushes its edges with gold. Somewhere inside, a heartbeat stirs beneath blankets patched and thin but warm enough to hold what's left of hope at the keep. Where the crown lies half buried under fallen beams and a drift of old leaves, the hush wraps around stones so ancient. It barely remembers the hands that stacked it. A single rook hops along the battlements, beak tapping at a patch of moss as if searching for a name worn away long before its feathers blackened. Above, the sky stretches open, soft and empty. A promise that nothing broken must stay that way forever, in the graveyard. Frost clings to the bramble's thorns, each one tipped in silver that will melt to dew by midday. The stones, so heavy, with names once spat like curses, lie quiet now. Roots thread through the bones beneath, pressing forgiveness into marrow that never learned how to kneel. Overhead, the bell tower stands crooked, its mouth open to the wind that carries no toll, only a hush that settles into earth and stone. Into the folds of every grave, binding silence around old sins like ivy around the chapel wall, and in this last hush before the day fully wakes. The world holds you the way no father ever did, steady, forgiving, warm at the edges. The worst of them fade here, their footsteps dissolving into the mist curling over frost-kissed fields. Their bargains slip into the river, the cellar. The orchard well carried so far you need not bear them any longer. All that remains is this slow breath, this hush that drifts through your chest like dawn through a cracked shutter. Let your thoughts lie still, small and soft as moth wings. Let the hush bind them tight so they need not roam corridors that remember too much. Sleep. Now, if you wish it. Or linger in this in-between half-dreaming, where the well hums its secrets into roots, where the crown rusts beneath the keep's broken stones, where father's voices scatter like dry leaves on the orchard floor. The hush holds you. The hush holds you. The hush holds you. Past the village's last chimney, where wood smoke thins into the pale blush of a sky not yet certain of day. The hush lingers, wrapping itself through hedgerows heavy with dew. It curls through the orchard, brushing each bare branch with a promise that no apple must fall tonight. No secret must slip from the well's dark mouth before morning has the courage to claim it. The hush settles on the stone bridge too, a thin frost glazing the railing where once footsteps hesitated. It's pressed blame into the river's restless skin. Further on, slips through the mill house by the bend in the river, the old wheel frozen. Quiet under its shroud of moss and frost. In the high window, that single candle guttered to a stub hours ago, its wax pooled cold in the saucer like an unfinished prayer. The hush here is thick as flower dust, soft as a child's breath against a pane of glass. It gathers up every echo of boots that never knocked again. A shallow dream that trembled by the hearth, up on the ridge.
Elf.
The keep leans into the dawn, stones rough with age, battlements broken where bramble reaches hungry fingers skyward. The crown that slipped from a father's brow lies buried under leaves damp with last night's rain. No hand lifts it now, no brow bows beneath its iron weight. The hush keeps it hidden, pressed against the earth, where roots grow through its circle like a promise. Nothing heavy stays heavy forever, beyond the walls. The plague hospital stands still, its wards empty, its iron beds lined with frost. The hush weaves around each rusted frame like a shroud, turning the cold metal gentle where once it cut deep. In the far corner where a surgeon's mercy was a blade sharper than his faith, the hush settles like a blanket, tucking the last sighs, under stone floors that remember so no one else must. Farther along the lane, the monasteries' ruined cloisters gather the hush into their arches. Candles left for prayers long spent lie scattered in the grass, wax softened by moss that climbs. The walls as if to hide old vows in green. Somewhere inside, a single beam of dawn slips through the cracks and brushes the cold floor. Warm enough to wake the dust swirling in the hush, back at the gatehouse. The hush pools around the spear propped by the door, its tip dulled by time and rain. It clings to the lintel where a child's small hand once rested, asking where the silver went, where the nights went, where the father went when his boots creaked off down the frozen road. The hush keeps the answer folded deep between stones. A lullaby for regrets too old to rattle the latch anymore, and through it all, cellar to keep, orchard to graveyard, forge to hunter's lodge, the hush drifts light as breath, wrapping each broken promise, each unkept vow, each father's echo in a warmth they never earned, but that you may keep for yourself sleep, if you wish. Let the hush carry your heartbeat the way the wind carries leaves across frostbitten fields. Let it slip between your ribs, curl around your bones like ivy through old stone, gentle, slow, patient enough to hold every story without letting any one of them cut too deep. This is the hush that stands watch where no father ever did. The hush that locks every cellar door, softens every stair creak, closes every ledger left open in the attic shadows. The hush that says, rest now. The worst of them have gone. The hush is yours now. The hush holds you. The hush holds you. The hush holds you, and as the hush settles deeper, the world beyond your window drifts quiet as breath held between dreams. The orchard stands watch in the soft spill of morning light, its gnarled branches creaking only when the wind leans in. To touch each one with frost, no footsteps press the damp earth here now, no father's boots to bruise fallen apples deeper into the soil. The well waits, stone slick with old secrets. But tonight it keeps them close, sealed beneath a hush too strong to break. At the stone bridge, the river slips under its arch, like silk drawn slow through a tired hand. The water carries no names. Now no blame heavy enough to drag it under. It runs smooth over the places where hooves once sparked against frozen ruts, where voices cracked with promises made softer than snow. A hush drapes over its banks, brushing reeds with the memory of footsteps that never found the far side. Past the bridge, the mill house leans against the bend in the river, walls sighing as dawn creeps in. The wheel is still, the hearth inside holds a cold grate where once an ember flickered, enough to keep shadows at bay when boots stamped through the door. But that echo is gone now, gathered into the hush that drifts up the stairs, round the pallet where a child once curled with a wooden bird pressed tight to a chest that never knew the weight of a father's steady hand. Up the frozen road. Hoof prints fill with meltwater, edges softened by the hush that sweeps through hedgerows heavy with bramble. Somewhere along that bend, the promise that slipped between clenched teeth and icy rains lies buried beneath drifts too deep for any search. The hush folds around it, a blanket of snow that forgives what tongues could not. Beyond the fields, the hunter's lodge sleeps beneath pine boughs, its walls wrapped tight with silence. Inside, the hearth's cold coals hold no scent of blood, no faint growl of hounds restless for the door to open. The hush presses into every corner, weaving between racks of antlers nailed to timbers that remember each promise snapped like brittle bone. Outside, the forest holds its breath, branches lifting slow under the first rays of day, each one humming with the hush that tells the roots, stay quiet. Let the footprints fade. Back toward the village edge, the plague hospitals shuttered. Windows glow pale with dawn's first light. No footsteps echo down its stone hall tonight. No whispered oaths drift from cat to cat. Only the hush remains thick as linen draped over an empty bed, pressing mercy into walls that once shivered with grief. The hush holds every confession, every soft lie of comfort told before the final breath. It carries them down the ward and out through the chapel arch, where the bell no longer tolls. The graveyard at the end of the lane lies hushed beneath its bramble crown. Frost beads the tilting stones, each letter worn down to a hush of its own. The worst fathers sleep beneath, the roots now, their names slipping quiet into clay that never lets go. Above them, the hush drapes, soft over the grass, tucking regrets into the earth where they can do no more harm. And through all of it, the orchard, the bridge, the mill, the forge, the tower, the hush keeps watch, hums gentle through. The walls you sleep behind, brushes your brow like a mother's hand should have, curls around your chest until the heartbeat slows to match the world's deep breathing. The hush does not judge, it does not ask, it simply gathers every broken vow, every echo of a father's shadow, and lays it down in the soft dark, so you need not carry it anymore. So breathe here. Let the hush slip between the last words your mind still turns over, smoothing their sharp edges until they lie flat and harmless. Let your thoughts drift rootless, like leaves across the orchard floor, soft and unhurried. Let your eyes grow. Heavy, let the hush hold you where no father ever could. It is yours now. It stays. The hush holds you. The hush holds you. And in this last quiet place, where the hush drapes over rooftops and slips under doorways worn smooth by centuries of feet, the world feels as though it exhales right beside you. The orchard behind the cottage grows still, its windfalls resting. In the duet grass, roots curling deeper into soil that remembers every footstep, every whispered promise, dropped like an apple into the dark dot at the ruined keep. Ivy winds tight around broken stones where the crown once slipped from a father's brow. There the hush settles thick as velvet in every crack. In every corner where a boy once stood, breath held behind his teeth, waiting for the voice that never softened. The hush hums through the gaps in the wall, weaving around that rusted ring of iron buried under leaves, folding the weight of it into earth that forgives what iron never could. Down the lane, the cellar door stays closed, its hinges swollen with damp. Remember too much voices traded for coin, the clink of silver that tasted like betrayal on a child's tongue. Now the hush presses down the stair, pooling cool and steady around old barrels and rotted beams. It seals every secret where it lies, deep enough that no ear will catch it, soft enough that no dream will stir it loose before dawn. Past the orchard well, where the rope once creaked under the burden of words never meant to climb back up, the hush pools like water at the bottom. It presses against stones worn slick by palms braced against their cold. A single apple floats there in the dark, bruised and bobbing, its skin puckered where old sins seeped in. The hush holds it still, keeps it from rising, keeps it from sinking. A secret balanced just so beneath the hush's gentle hand. By the stone bridge, the river slips smooth under its arch. Frost rings the banks where footsteps once slipped, blame tangled in reeds that nod in the slow current. The hush drapes over the water, pressing the splash and gasp down where they can do no harm. It trails along the bridge's spine like a ribbon, pulling every harsh word spoken there downriver, out toward the wide sea that swallows everything given enough time. In the mill house, The wheel sleeps beneath a skin of moss, the hush settling between its paddles like a lullaby sung, low and slow. The candle in the high window guttered to darkness hours ago, its last glow weaving through the hush that curls up the stairs. Around the pallet by the door, across the place where a child's breath once fogged a single cracked pane of glass, the hush holds that breath now, warm against the dawn chill. Beyond the gatehouse, as the frozen road has begun to thaw, muddy ruts shining like silver scars where the first light touches them. No hooves strike sparks here now, no wagon creaks beneath a weight too heavy to carry to the next village. The hush seeps into each rut, softening the edges until they lie smooth, until every promise lost to snowdrifts quiet beneath new grass, waiting for spring's touch, and high above, in the crooked bell tower. The hush coils around the silent clapper, cold iron gone still as a child's heartbeat before sleep. It hums through the rafters where owls nest in broken beams, brushing feathers soft as breath. Below, stones pressed tight over graves hold what they must. Names fade in the hush, their edges smoothed by frost and forgiving roots. It all folds. Together now, the orchard's sigh, the river's hush, the wheel's stillness. The tower's breath, a single blanket pulled gentle across your shoulders where you lie. There is no cellar door to open, no bootsteps to wake the stair. The hush holds every father's broken promise far from your bedside, tucking it deep into the earth where it sinks and sinks until it is only soil again, so sleep. Let your bones lie soft against the mattress. Let your thoughts loosen like knots. Beneath warm water, let the hush be enough, more than any crown, any vow, any voice that once said your name, with more weight than care. Kss. This hush says nothing. It simply stays draped over your chest, your brow, the quiet room around you. No footsteps in the orchard now, no cellar door, no bridge to cross alone. Only the hush. The hush holds you.
Yes.
The hush holds you. The hush holds you, and still the hush deepens, spreading like dawn's first warmth through the cracks of old beams, the seams of cottage walls that have heard too much knocking and too few soft words spoken true. Outside, the orchard breathes mist into the air, each bare branch bending just enough to brush the hush deeper into the grass, where fallen apples have long since turned to soil. The wellstone stays slick, its rope slack against the lip, each drop that falls inside caught in silence, so complete it feels like forgiveness. The cellar door remains shut now, its latch swollen with age and damp. No boot scrapes the threshold. No whisper coils up the stair like smoke that won't stay contained. The hush has wrapped around every secret hidden there, settling into the old barrels, the dusty corners where betrayal once tasted sweet as cider. Now it tastes of nothing, just cool earth and the faint sweetness of sleep. At the bridge, frost still hugs the stone arch, its edges soft in the early light. Beneath it, the river glides, carrying away what blame remains, smoothing it over silt and roots that do not care who spoke which word first or last. The hush drifts along the current, weaving itself into eddies that slip under reeds, brushing the banks where no footprints linger now. The hush is patient, washing every echo until it is only water, slipping out to the wide mouth of the sea, the mill house by the bend creaks just once as the hush drifts through its walls. It curls up the stair to the pallet where, once a child, curled small, wooden bird tucked to chest, waiting for boots that never stopped at the door. There is no door now, there's no latch to lift. Only the hush, pressing warm around the thin places, filling every crack with the promise that no footstep will wake the wheel tonight. Farther up, the frozen road softens under a sky painted soft rose and pearl. The ruts shine like mirrors turned skyward, puddles that remember hoofbeats but keep their hush deep beneath the thawing mud. The wagon, the reins, the whispered vow traded for coin too thin to spend, all of it sinks into the hush that breathes. Through hedgerows leaning close, brambles stretching their thorns to cup what remains of regret, and the tower. The crooked bell tower whose stone mouth has hung open. Long it has forgotten the taste of sound holds its hush like a blessing. In the belfry, the broken rope sways once, but the clapper does not strike. Rests where it must, rusted through, humming the hush down through beams that groan only when the wind sighs too hard against their bones. Below, graves lean shoulder, To shoulder under blankets of frost, each name softened into syllables the hush has already memorized and set to rest. Past the orchard gate, the ruined keep lets the hush in through every arrow slit and cracked wall. Ivy clings to its stones, curling tight around what's left of iron and gold, weaving roots through the crown buried beneath years of fallen leaves. Here, the hush feels oldest, patient enough to outlast the taste of iron, gentle enough to press against the memory of every vow that cut more than it mended. And through it all, the hush slips soft through your room under the latch, across the floorboards, between the layers of blankets gathered at your shoulders. It presses into the hollow behind your ribs, that space where old echoes sometimes rattle loose when sleep runs thin. The hush holds them now, not to hide them, but to cradle them, to rock them slow as a lantern swinging in a draft, to hum them back into earth and roots and river silt where they belong. No father's boots strike the stair, no voice calls your name rough with regret. No shadow shifts at the orchard gate, only the hush remains, drifting through your hair, brushing your brow cool and warm at once, sealing each breath gentle in your chest. Let the hush be enough. Let it stand watch, where no other guard ever did. Let it weave its quiet vow around your sleep. Nothing heavy stays heavy forever. No secret stays sharp forever. No door stays unlatched when the hush closes it for you. Sleep now. Sleep easy. The hush holds you. The hush holds you. The hush holds you. And so the hush settles deeper still, thicker than any blanket pulled across. Weary shoulders in the chill before dawn. Beyond the orchard gate, the lane bends into mist, ruts softened by thawing frost, each puddle catching a fragment of pale sky and holding it quiet, like a lullaby you can carry, but never quite remember word for word. In the mill house, the wheel that once turned grain to bread creaks once in its sleep, timber swollen by decades of rain, and the hush that fills each spoke. The hearth remains dark. The pallet by the stair knows only warmth now, not the scrape of boots, nor the rustle of pockets turned inside out to prove there was never enough to feed two mouths. The hush smooths the walls here like flowers sifted through tired hands, softening every echo until even the mill's bones breathe slow. Down at the stone bridge, the river folds its secrets under the current, where once a boy's eyes caught the moon's reflection and searched for boots that never returned. Now the hush drifts between reeds and roots. It holds the blame that slipped from frost-slick stones, sinking it deeper each season, burying it beneath silt so fine no finger could ever trace it back. The hush hums there, a low promise to the water, carry it all away.
Keep carrying
Until it breaks apart in the
Salt mouth of the sea. Farther off, the plague hospital stands hushed, its rows of beds as empty as the sky above. Walls that once wept with coughs and final words now sigh beneath the hush's gentle weight, each iron cot a cradle for the silence that grows there like moss on stone. The hush finds every sharp edge, every splintered vow, and lays it flat, presses it into the damp mortar until it cannot rise again. What mercy could not do, the hush finishes, no blade, no bargain, only stillness. Up the frozen road, hoarfrost clings to hedgerows, sparkling where the hush strokes each branch with dawn's slow breath. The wheel ruts glisten, shining like glass, before they melt into soft mud that holds no trace of footsteps or hooves that slipped away into drifts too deep to cross. Here the hush feels tender, like a hand pressed firm to your shoulder when you think no one is left to see you through. It says rest. It says let it go. The road is only earth again now, waiting for wildflowers when the thaw comes in the ruined keep. Bramble winds through arrow slits, thorny fingers tangling with old stone. Where the crown once pressed its cold circle into a father's brow, the hush grows thick and green, pushing roots through iron until it cracks. No more weight, it whispers, no more throne to keep warm. For a boy who stands below, eyes hollow from the hush that should have come sooner, the hush comes now instead, curling around each block of stone, pulling them down gentle into earth, where nothing needs a name anymore, and in the graveyard. The hush drapes its frost cloak over each tilting stone, hums around the brambles, that knot themselves tight over unspoken regrets. No father's shadow walks here now. No footsteps rustle through nettles after dark. Hush holds every last breath spoken in anger, every blessing that soured on the tongue. It weaves roots through ribs that once strained to shout and lets them grow quiet, quiet, quiet. Back inside, the hush reaches your door. It slips under the sill, curls across the floorboards worn smooth by nights you wished would pass faster. It rises up your blanket's edge, tucking the corners tight as a mother's hand might have. The hush touches your chest, where your breath comes easy now, not held tight like coins in a pocket, but slow and steady as the river that carries every story away. No vow presses at your ear now. No boot scrapes the stair. No latch clicks open. Only the hush. It gathers every heavy thing you carried, every sharp word you tucked away for later, every ghost that rattled your windows in the long dark. It folds them into earth and stone and root and lets them rest where they belong, far from your bones, far from your sleep. So sleep now. Let your mind slip soft into the orchard's hush, the cellar's hush, the bridge's hush. Let the river carry what it must. Let the keep crumble, stone by stone, until only ivy and hush remain. Let the dawn rise slow, brushing your brow gentle with its pale hand. Nothing will come knocking tonight. The hush holds you. The hush holds you. The hush holds you. And so the hush stays, breathing through every rafter above you, pressed into the tiny gaps between stone and timber where old winds once crept in to rattle your sleep. Beyond the walls, the orchard stands bare but patient, its branches black lace against the pearl dawn. Each root sunk deep in earth, fed by the stories you no longer need to carry. The well holds its secrets tight at the bottom, water calm and black, cradling every word once spoken to its dark mouth. No echoes now. Only the hush curling, cool against the mossy stones. Past the orchard gate, the cellar door stays swollen shut. Inside, barrels sag into damp soil. Hoops rusted through, every bargain sealed inside like seeds that will never sprout. A hush presses in through the cracked lintel, soft as breath against old casks and worn floorboards. What was hidden stays? Buried here, roots twined tight around the hush that keeps it from finding your dreams again. By the bridge. The river slides beneath its arch, the water low and clear where reeds nod against the stones. The hush glides with it, weaving through currents that remember boot soles slipping on frost, fingers clutching for a railing too late to hold. But the hush makes no judgment. It carries every name into the deep bend, where silt drifts over lost things until they are only the rivers now. Let it keep them for you. Let it hush them into nothing. At the mill house, the wheel rests. Moss furred around the paddles, each spoke stilled in the hush of dawn. Inside, the hearth knows no sparks tonight, no boots at the threshold, no voice. Slurred, soft and sharp in the same breath. The hush winds through the beams, settles in the corners where a child once curled small, hands cupped around a wooden bird. That bird sleeps too, tucked against the hush that promises, no footsteps will cross this floor tonight. Up the frozen road. Thought trickles into wagon ruts, turning old frost to dark pools that reflect the hedge branches overhead. The hush smooths. Every rut softens the edges where promises once caught like stones under a wheel. No hooves strike sparks here now. No cart creaks past the orchard gate with a promise it will never keep. The hush spreads its weight into the earth until the road is only mud and snow, and the promise of wildflowers come spring, and beyond it all. The keep leans into morning light, its battlements crumbling beneath bramble that drinks rain like a blessing. The hush settles into arrow slits and hollow halls, winding through the broken stairs where footsteps once paused before they turned away for good. In the tower's highest corner, the crown lies half-buried, iron rim, kissed by ivy root. The hush wraps around it like a cloth, pressing its weight away, whispering, "This burden is not yours to lift tonight." Even the graveyard breathes the hush now, stones furred with frost. Brambles bent low over names that no voice speaks above. Whisper anymore. Beneath each tilted slab, the hush hums through soil and bone, folding every last regret into the roots that spread far beneath the chapel wall. Nothing rises from here but green shoots and the hush that tells the dawn. There is no more blame. To carry forward, inside your room, the hush settles at the edge of your bed. It gathers all the pieces you've scattered like coins across sleepless nights, the orchard's apples, the river's cold, the cellar's secrets, the keep's broken crown, and tucks them away behind your ribs where they can do no harm. Your breath comes easy now. The hush moves with it, warm and steady, as though the world itself presses a palm to your chest, reminding you you are here, you are safe, you are more than the shadows these fathers left behind. No footsteps climb the stair, no latch lifts, no voice calls your name from the doorway. There is only this, your heartbeat, the hush, the slow promise that nothing heavy stays heavy forever. Let it go. Let it slip into the orchard soil, the cellar dirt, the bridge's dark water. Let the hush keep it there while your eyes drift closed. You do not need to hold it tonight. The hush holds you. The hush holds you. The hush holds you, and deeper still the hush unfurls, as gentle as dawn's first light sliding over the orchard wall. Brushing each black branch with a promise that nothing more must break tonight. Beyond the shutter, the orchard settles its roots, into soil rich with stories you will never have to wake for again. Each fallen apple turned soft in the grass, each half-buried stone beneath the well, each bramble at the far fence line, all held fast by the hush that slips through every gap and knot in the wood. At the cellar door, frost feathers the latch, a quiet lock that hums to itself in the hush. Inside, the air is cool, the barrel's heavy with secrets that will never bubble up again. The hush breathes across the earthen floor, smoothing away footprints and careless bargains, pressing them down beneath the damp boards until they are only whispers that cannot find your dreams. Above it, the hearth holds its warmth steady, and the hush cradles each flicker of ember like a lullaby sung just for you. The bridge stands empty under the soft sweep of dawn, its stones slick with mist. The river glides below, dark and slow, the hush winding with the current, tugging old echoes away from the mossy bank. Every footstep, every slip, every voice that once lingered here, all of it drifts beneath the arch, carried under reeds that sway like gentle hands brushing the river's hair smooth. Let it flow on, the hush says. Let it carry what you need, not keep. Past the bend, the millhouse sighs in its beams. The wheels still beneath the hush that weaves between moss and spoke. Upstairs, the small bed stays warm, the wooden bird resting on the sill, where dawn's pale light finds it. No boots scrape the floorboards, no shadows cross the threshold. The hush drapes its warmth across that room like a blanket heavier than any grief, soft enough to hold each shallow breath until sleep claims it whole. Up the road, the wagon ruts shine like scars kissed by thaw. Brambles lean over the path, their frost-tipped thorns holding the hush-like threads that stitch every old promise back into the earth. No hoofbeats rise here, no wagon creaks under. The weight of words spent too soon. The hush softens the road until it is only mud and thawed grass, waiting for new roots to find their way through the hard places at the keep. The hush curls through broken halls, drifting over stones that once bore the weight of crowns and vows too sharp for any brow to bear. The crown lies hidden in the hush now, rusted and half swallowed by ivy that drinks the dawn's chill dew. No voice echoes down the stair. No boy's breath catches in his throat, waiting for a kindness that never came. The hush speaks for thee. Walls now, telling them gently to crumble stone by stone until they become earth again, warm and forgiving, and in the graveyard. Frost beads the bramble that ties each tilted headstone together like a chain too light to drag. The hush moves beneath the soil, winding through rib and root, pressing old regrets into marrow that no longer remembers the shape of blame. Above it, a crow settles on the chapel's broken lintel, feathers puffed against the hush that hums soft through every crevice of stone. Nothing stirs. Nothing rattles the latch of the world you have built beyond these fathers, and here, in your room, the hush gathers last. It slips across the floorboards and settles along your side, warm as a breath against the nape of your neck. Slow as dawn finding the windowsill, curls around your ribs, easing every tight place where old words tried to hide. It hums through your chest, your shoulders, your spine, an old melody you somehow remember, even though no one ever taught it to you. The hush holds what you set down. The hush holds what you cannot name. Promises no footsteps on the stair. No latch lifting in the dark. No voice behind the door asking you to hold what was never yours to keep. The hush says sleep. It says rest. It says the orchard will stand, the river will run, the wheel will turn, come spring, and none of it needs your fear to keep it moving. So breathe now. Your bones grow heavy as roots in warm soil. Let your mind drift where the hush hums through the orchard gate, down the cellar stair, over the bridge, across the fields to the graveyard where every worst father sleeps alone. Let the hush bind it all behind you like ivy through old stone. You are here. You are warm. The hush holds you. The hush holds you. The hush holds you, and still the hush drifts. Slow and sure as the mist rolling over the orchard rose at first light, folding around every bruise and root until not even the trees remember what fell and what stayed. The well lies quiet in its mossy ring of stones, the rope slack against the rim, the water far below as dark and calm as sleep itself. Every secret once dropped down that throat rests easy now, layered beneath silt and hush so thick no echo dares rise again beyond the gate. The cellar holds its hush close to boards swollen tight, hinges rusted still. Inside the damp air, breathe slow against casks that have not rolled in years, secrets curled at the bottom like seeds too tired to sprout. The hush curls under the stair, pressing itself deep into the grain until not even the sharpest memory can slip between the cracks. Let the hush keep the door closed. Let the hush keep your dreaming safe. The bridge arches over the river, stones, slick with frost that catches the new sun in silver flecks. The hush moves beneath it, winding with the dark current, brushing reeds that bend and sway like children's hair combed smooth before sleep. Far out where the river deepens, blame drifts low, carried out past the bend where no footstep has ever followed. The hush hums along the banks, soft as a lullaby with no words left to sing. Down the lane, the mill house leans into its hush. The wheels slack against the mill race, moss clinging to wood that will not turn until spring's warmth returns. Inside, the hush fills the corners where the walls once echoed with boots. With the sharp hush of a voice that never knew how to speak soft enough, the pallet stays warm, the wooden bird at rest on the sill. The hush lays over that small shape like a quilt pulled snug. Promise enough that no door will creak tonight. Past the orchard's frost-slick wall, the road uncoils toward the fields. Ruts fading as thaw turns ice to soft earth. No hoofbeats come now, no iron wheel to grind the frozen stones. The hush slides over puddles rimmed with brittle grass, slips under the hedge where bramble tangles all the sharpness into knots. Tight, not even regret can pry them loose. The hush keeps the road empty, keeps your steps folded deep inside the warmth of your bed. At the keep, the hush finds every break in the stones, each place where mortars has crumbled to dust and ivy pushes through. It drapes itself over the old. Thrown over the crown, half lost in weeds, pressing the iron cold until it no longer remembers the shape of a father's brow. In the tower's highest hollow, the hush settles thick and still, sealing away every echo of questions asked in rooms too high and too far from kindness. Let the hush keep the walls crumbling gentle back into earth. Let it bury every vow. Weighed more than love ever could, and there, at the graveyard's far corner, the hush curls into bramble that wraps the tilted stones. Frost feathers each name until the letters blur into the hush itself, a promise that no voice will rattle them awake, no shadow will rise to cross your threshold again. Beneath the roots, every old word sinks deeper, pressed tight by soil that does not care who broke what or why. Overhead, the sky pales to dawn, softening every edge. Back here, in this small, quiet room, the hush gathers its final fold around you, moves through the air you breathe, warming your ribs where your heartbeat slows. It slips between your shoulder, blades down the curve of your spine, over the hollow of your throat where worry used to perch at night. There is no voice behind the door now, no footstep on the stair. Only the hush, so patient, so soft, so steady, you can feel your bones sinking into it like roots into good soil. Nothing presses for you to hold tonight. No crown to bear, no cellar locked to guard, no bridge to stand upon waiting for footsteps that never come. Let the orchard hold its fallen fruit. Let the river carry its blame. Let the hush rock you where you lie, each breath deeper than the last, till the world fades down to roots and stone and dreams where you are untouched by every vow that ever frayed. This is yours now. The hush holds you. Hush holds you. The hush holds you. And so the hush goes on, softer than breath in the crook of your collarbone. Warmer than any hearth that once cracked with embers and false promises alike. Outside, the orchard leans into the slow, pale drift of dawn, each bare limb traced in silver frost that glitters for no one but the crows perched among the highest branches. They watch the hush settle under the roots, slipping between stones, and worms gathering up every last whisper dropped like an apple into dark soil. Nothing must rise from that dirt tonight. The well-mouth yawns open, rimmed dark with moss that drinks the hush like dew. Far below, water laps the stones, cradling secrets in its black bowl. The hush presses down there, too, a steady hand against the ripple, smoothing it flat, so no old word can find its way back up the rope to your dreaming ears. Let it stay buried, sweet and cold and done. Down the hill, the bridge stands still under the hush. The river moves soft beneath the arch, reeds nodding in the hush like sleepers, agreeing to keep the worst of it drifting away forever. The frost. On the stones melts one drop at a time, each drop sliding into the current that winds past the fields, out past the edge of any map that matters. If the water hums, it is only the hush, no names, no blame, only hush. Past the mill house, the wheel leans quiet against its moss, paddles glazed with last night's frost. Inside, the hush folds into the rafters, where once a boot scraped the beam. It winds up the narrow stair to the pallet in the loft, tucking the corners tight, warm where a child's ribs once rattled small in the dark.
Ow.
The hush hums there now, softer than any father's voice ever was, softer than any door left unlocked. Up the frozen road, dawn breathes its first warmth into old wagon ruts. Meltwater pooling shallow where iron once cut deep. Bramble arches overhead, tips rimmed with pearl frost. The hush drifts through the hedgerow, pressing every broken vow into thawing soil until it lies heavy and wet. Nothing more than tomorrow's mud. No hoofbeats.
Ow.
No cart creaking its false. Promise past your dreaming threshold, the hush says. The road keeps its secrets now. You do not have to carry them. In the keep, the hush curls through the cracked halls. Over the stone steps where once a crown's weight bent a boy's spine before he could grow straight. The hush slips beneath the iron ring tangled in ivy, pressing it down, letting rust bloom gentle in the cracks until even the crown forgets how to bruise a brow. The hush hums in the arrow slits in the high cold chamber, sealing away each echo of a father's vow spoken too sharp to heal. Let the hush hold the walls together until they crumble clean into earth and in the graveyard. Brambles knot themselves tight around the names that sleep there, frost stitching them silent one letter at a time. Roots coil deeper, pulling every memory down where the hush waits, cool and dark. Nothing rises from this ground tonight. No footsteps across old nettles, no voice drifting up the lane to find your door. The hush stands watch over the stones, over the bones, over every secret you will never need to wake for. Here in your room, the hush gathers itself at last. It presses close to your cheek, breathing slow against your hair. It slides around your ribs, smoothing the tight place behind your heart where old words sometimes rattle loose. It hums through your pulse, soft as water under the bridge, soft as the orchard wind threading between your dreams. No latch lifts, no cellar door swings. No crown presses your brow, no father's boots strike the stair. Only the hush remains wide enough to hold every heavy thing you set down, deep enough to cradle each sigh that carries the last edge of wakefulness away. So breathe. Let the hush fold you in, gentle as moss around stone. Let it slip through. The orchard, the river, the mill house, the frozen road, the tower that stands crooked under dawn's pale wash. Let it carry every ghost far enough that they forget the shape of your name. You are here, you are warm, you are safe. The hush holds. The hush holds you.